thank you very much for coming on this rather cold Thursday night. We knew not to schedule this for Monday night because we were all home watching the last episode of You Know What. Okay, so my name's Hilary Glow. I'm the Director of the Arts Management Program at Deakin University. You can see we've gone like crazy with the branding. In addition to running an arts management program, we have developed a new program, a new project called the Arts Participation Incubator. And for the last year and a half, we've been running a whole series of events, basically interested in issues about arts participation and extending the audience experience of the arts. And we've done a whole lot of terrific and very interesting things, and people have been enthusiastic about it. And we've also taken the opportunity to put on each of your seats a flyer where the next event, we're giving you a heads up about the next event, which is in November. It's called The Art of the Impossible. We're doing it in collaboration with a fantastic group called Doing Something Good. And we think it might be the very first time that artists have an opportunity to get into the room with social entrepreneurs, innovators, social activists and so forth. So the idea of the day will be to provide networking opportunities and to actually share some insights about resourcing. How do you resource new and innovative work? How do you build new audiences? And how can you use connections to help bring your ideas to fruition? So it's a really exciting day, and please come along if you're available. So we are obviously, as part of the API, the whole sort of area of festivals is one that interests us. And in particular, we wanted to look at the cultural role of festivals in relation to a couple of key questions. Who are festivals for? Who's not there? Who's not in the room? Or if it's not a room, anywhere else? And the key question, are festivals changing to meet the demands of a new generation of audiences and participants? I noticed the other day that the Battersea Arts Centre, I don't know if any of you, it's an absolutely fantastic arts organisation in the UK, and aside from being a brilliant arts organisation, they have this completely fabulous mission statement. So with zero modesty, their mission is to, quote, invent the future of theatre. We invited these panellists today because they're all associated with bold and innovative cultural festivals, and as such, we think they are key participants in the invention of the future of festivals. As you all know, we have more festivals than you can poke a stick at in Australia. Some of them are more adventurous than others, but it's clearly timely to ask some questions about their future relevance to us as a community, as arts audiences, as consumers. So the way we'll proceed today is that each speaker has 10 or 15 minutes, and there'll be an opportunity for questions and answers at the end. Because we don't have a roving mic, you are also welcome to use to tweet, and the hashtag is at API Burning, hashtag API Burning. And I'll attempt to do my very best Tony Jones impersonation and read your tweets while conducting a civilised conversation. Once the forum's over, we really, really want you to come outside with us, because outside we've planned a live art participative event. It's called Words with Melbourne, and you'll hear more about it. We've actually we've commissioned an artist to make a work in Fed Square for you to partake in. So this is not just a sit down and listen kind of event, it's a get out there and do. And towards the end, I'll invite Lenine Burke, the artist, to come and explain to you what we're doing. So it's fun. One of our key supporters at the API is Fed Square, and I'd really like to thank Renee Dudfield and Matt Jones for being very supportive of not just this event but all of our API events. Matt has come to say a few words. Time.
Welcome everybody. My name's Matt Jones. I manage the overall program of events and activities at Federation Square. Ironically enough, I've got no control over anything that happens in this building right now, which being ACME, but welcome nonetheless on behalf of ACME, as well as anyone from ACME in the room. Well, welcome on their behalf. I would like to just acknowledge and pay my respects to the traditional Indigenous owners of this precinct, and I'd also like to acknowledge and pay my respects to the contemporary occupants of this precinct. One of the joys of being able to work in an environment like Federation Square is that we really are sometimes in a deliberately cultivated way, sometimes in spite of ourselves. We're really at the nexus of a lot of different layers of discourse and a lot of different forms of contemporary representation, of community representation, some of which are contemporary, some of which are historical, some of which represent cultures and communities that are very, very fragile or have various challenges, some of which are very, very strong, some of which have an overt artistic or creative purpose to what they do, some of which are overtly commercial. The beauty of a place like this is that we attempt to accommodate everybody in multiple layers of experiences day in, day out. We're really, really, really happy to be able to collaborate with the API and Hillary and colleagues. I'm really looking forward to hearing what all the panellists have to contribute in terms of contemporary forms of expression, although, as I understand it, each panellist represents a very, very different style of festival. I think there is probably going to be a common denominator of experience and focus on innovation and letting go of rules. I'd like to think that we as an organisation and as a precinct also have some degree of equivalent ethos in trying to push forward what contemporary cultural representation and expression is all about. Sometimes we do it well. I think there's a lot of great examples around Fed Square and our constituent tenants at the moment of such forms of contemporary cultural expression. Sometimes we don't do it so well, but I think when you're in a precinct like this, when the eyes of at least the city, if not beyond, are on you, day in, day out, year in, year out, you learn cumulatively what works, what doesn't, and how to keep inviting people in. So the last portion of people I'd like to acknowledge and respect is each of you for coming along and being involved, hopefully quite proactively, if we've got time for questions, in a discourse around contemporary forms of public creative expression. We, as a team of generalists, don't often have much of an opportunity to get deep or to get particularly involved in layers of discourse like this. So I'm very, very grateful to Hillary. I'm very, very grateful to the other contributing members of the API. I'm very, very grateful to Deakin Uni for having the foresight to facilitate the API and having the foresight to sponsor the Deakin Edge on the other side of the site as well. It's a partnership which is gestating and growing, but which we really, really value, and hopefully forums like this with illustrious panellists like what we're going to hear from will continue and increase in quantity as time goes by. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Okay, so our first speaker today is Bear Kite. Bear is the person on the panel who looks like he's just come from the label, the record, the Sgt. Pepper's. What? and this is Bear is the global ambassador for Burning Man USA, and in this role he says he gets to, quote, initiate global experiences with cultural pioneers from the realms of entrepreneurship, government, science and art to accelerate innovation and cultural transformation. Just imagine putting that on your business card. Thanks, Bear.
Hey, everybody. Well, this is awesome. Really happy to be here with you guys. I wish I could wander around the room and come close, but I'm going to have to stay near this microphone so that this video content can be shared with the world. So, how many of you have heard of Burning Man? Raise your hands. Ooh, whole room. Almost, right? Yeah, the whole room. How many of you have been to Burning Man? Okay. How many of you know that there's a Burning Man here in Australia? Oh, okay, that's a majority. How many of you know that Burning Man in Australia, called Burning Seed, is actually going on right now? Wonderful. Yeah, so right after this event, we're going to hop in the car, drive about 6.5 hours north past Wagga Wagga. Is that right? Wagga Wagga. and head to Burning Seed, which is a really amazing event from all that we've heard. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what Burning Man is and just sort of the modern state of the idea of this sort of festival culture as you guys have put this event together. I think it's completely fascinating to see really Australia being so unique in terms of how you guys do fund the arts, or at least up until now have been funding the arts, and and having like Acme right here and Fed Square and Deakin University, there's just such a clear culture, whether it's that festival culture or sort of the civic culture, and how there is a lot of collaboration here to facilitate creating the space within urban environments to really have this kind of conversation. And so kudos to you guys as a society and as all the institutions involved for bringing this together, because this does not necessarily happen that frequently, and this is really cool, and I'm really glad to be here. So, festivals. We think about what a festival is, and we might think about that in terms of something like Woodstock, which is pictured up here, or this idea of sort of how do we create our civilization, and what does it look like when we come together and sort of make an intention around sort of having a temporary experience. And there's been a bunch of different models that have emerged for what that looks like. And I'm going to talk a little bit about this. So obviously we know sort of this model of a music festival like Woodstock or Monterey Pop, and have seen that from the 60s spawn all around the world, which can be incredible. This, people are able to come together, turning whatever site, whether it's an urban environment or rural environment, into a temporary, city of around different arts and participation and such. Although what we've seen with a lot of these festivals, is a commodity environment. I mean, there's been examples, Woodstock's gates came down and it became a ticketless event, or Monterey Pop when it started in 1967. That whole idea was, around getting all the artists to play for free and the money to go to nonprofits. But we've seen really, in most cases, a lot of these events become ticketed events, and Burning Man is a ticketed event as well, where people come in and they're sort of headlining artists and then fans and spectators. Well, in some ways, the art world is pretty similar. We have all sorts of different examples of what art looks like. But, I think the model comes to mind of sort of museums, and you come in and, there's this amazing art there that was either done in historical lineage or maybe it's being sold in a Sotheby's auction, and, there's this whole sort of attitude around the art. But the interactivity seems to be an emerging threat. Whether that's because, the millennials these days are using technology and like to sort of tinker with things, or whatever it is. We're seeing all sorts of new interactive art seem to come along, which then leads to sort of the reimagination and contextualization of what kind of physical spaces, we use to house that context. So Burning Man kind of happened by accident and also kind of happened completely intentionally. It started back in the 80s when San Francisco had sort of this bohemian scene going on. There were things like the Cacophony Society, and this guy named Larry Harvey essentially got together with his friends in 1986 and built a wooden sculpture of a man, an effigy, and burned it with a bunch of friends on the beach in San Francisco. And year after year, that built, essentially more and more people started coming, and it was just really to come, show up, have a community gathering, and sort of self-organize. By 1990, it had gotten so big that the city of San Francisco essentially said, you can't do this here anymore. And so they moved to the middle of the Nevada desert to the playa, where they test the high-speed cars, and essentially found this place that was like an ocean that you could walk on. And that became the context for this social experiment called Burning Man that has really, over the last 27 years, grown and grown and grown as a civic platform for community. It's a social experimentation around self-organization and art. We've now grown into a city of almost 70,000 people and have spread all around the world. And this has happened in all sorts of ways. So it begs us to sort of ask the question of what are the petri dishes that we choose to create? What are the frameworks that we sort of instill as the prerequisite conditions for allowing the emergence of collaborative society to sort of emerge through? I think we all know there's plenty of models to look at it, whether it's top down or bottom up and such. At Burning Man, it's both, and it's both simultaneously. And so, in a way, you can't help but to think about sort of the organic cell form and how all these different types of models can emerge. And even if they only emerge like some of these elements for a millisecond in a laboratory, there is a sort of new molecular form that can emerge. So the question becomes, if we want to sort of learn from these emergences, how do we sustain them? And can we sustain them? And what is to learn from the sort of spontaneous existence of these cultures? Well, a lot of times we can learn by looking from above and sort of seeing how these things look as they actually manifest. What you're looking at here on the left is Black Rock City, which is the city where Burning Man in Nevada happens. Here in Australia, it's called Red Earth City. And on the right is Cheyenne, Wyoming. They're both around the same size in population. You can sort of see how they're sprawled out a little differently. This is what Burning Man looks like from actually this is a drone flying over the playa from this last year. And you can sort of see just how the actual event sort of creates this different feeling and experience for the participants inside of it. And one of the things about Burning Man is that there is no commerce that is engaged in the city. And in addition to that, in terms of actual money and transactions, or even bartering, which doesn't happen, you have a gift economy where essentially people show up and bring their gift, and that creates this culture that the city runs off of. You also don't have sponsors or logos thrown up, people sort of trying to take credit for their actions in that direct sort of way. That the culture hasn't really emerged that way. It's something that isn't really the way it looks. And so what you have is this open canvas, this open environment where, almost in an allegorical way, people can show up, be who they want to be, and go on their own adventures. And really the paramount sort of creative value really is creativity and the human potential as it's manifested through creativity. And as such, we see all sorts of amazing art all around the playa, and that's starting to spread around the world. Also, you have fun examples of the ways you get around the city. It's actually quite large. So people come up with all sorts of clever mechanisms for moving around. And again, this is this example of the sort of DIY, everything is art. All these different capacities. And it can be quite fun and exciting and ridiculous, but at the same time, it does beg to ask the question of what is art and what isn't art? And in a civic capacity, is it possible to sort of redefine everything in our lives, even utilities, as art, opportunities to reimagine? And a lot of this art that comes out there, as wonky as it is, it fundamentally is interactive. And it takes, in this case, it's not playing, but essentially a bunch of people drum around this monkey sculpture. And when the rhythm gets right, the thing starts moving around, or bikers power it. So this phenomenon, this culture called Burning Man that has emerged, is really now spread around the world. And it's happened organically as people have come to the event in Nevada and wanted to bring it back to their communities. So now Burning Man, like I said, is in over 27 countries around the world and growing. These are all different places around the world that actually have a burn, like how Burning Seed is happening right now here in Australia. And some other interesting things have happened as a result of this culture. Once again, being more than just a festival culture where people come out on a temporary basis, but actually this civic culture, where people are sort of recreating a civic environment. People have been coming out there and learning how to use heavy machinery to build these huge art installations and sculptures, or to train in all sorts of different, very specific functions. In 2005, there was a group of people at Burning Man when Hurricane Katrina struck, who all decided to leave Burning Man and take their heavy equipment and go straight down to Mississippi to help with the hurricane relief. And from this, an organization called Burners Without Borders was formed. And you can see on the map here all different examples of Burners Without Borders going around the world to actually engage in things ranging from disaster relief to civic engagement on the ground in communities. And then we have a foundation called the Black Rock Arts Foundation, from which people take a lot of these different types of art that essentially are civic engagement projects and bring them to cities around the world. And more of the grants that we're giving out are international. And some of these projects are pretty amazing. This is a very new installation in San Francisco on the Bay Bridge, and it's called the Bay Lights Project. It's about over 25,000 LEDs put into the Bay Bridge. The artist behind this, Leo Villarreal, came up with this idea of doing this light art actually when he was at Burning Man, and he essentially wanted to create a mechanism for people to not get lost in the city. And as a result, he started experimenting with this light art. And now we're starting to see this in cities like San Francisco, New York, even on the Eiffel Tower. So from this culture that's evolved over 27 years as a self-organized community, we've come up with sort of 10 basic principles of what the Burning Man culture looks like. This isn't a dogma, this isn't something to be interpreted super literally, but just a framework to work through. And these are things like radical inclusion and gifting, decommodification, which I think is a really important one as well, and my favorite, which is immediacy. And this is really the notion that there is no substitute for direct experience, period. The value of experiential learning, both on an individual and a collective level, and how that informs us as a society. So like I said, there's a whole ecosystem of nonprofits and regional organizations that have been emerged through Burning Man and this network and this culture. And it comes to this place where, for me, I step back and I look at really, the state of our current world, and whether we look at our political institutions and our civic institutions and our environment and whatever it is that your issue you care about, we think about what is the way to move forward as a species. And it seems to be that we have to look to nature to understand these different models for how we can function. These are starlings as they fly over England. They call what they do this thing called murmuration, which is this non-hierarchical, self-organizing sort of serendipitous mutation as a species, and they fend off predators through essentially mutating to evolve more effectively together as a species. So how can we do this together, and how can festival culture or reimagining our civic way of interacting with each other facilitate this acceleration of our evolution as a species? Well, it seems like it's already happening. And in some ways, you could look at technology and social media as having built a sort of central nervous system throughout our civilization that connects us in real time in a way never done before in our history. And we may just be at the infancy of understanding what the manifestation of this in our society is. And we're starting to see the change in the world that's starting to happen. Now, the U.S. government is closed right now, I believe, still as such. And here in Australia, we have some new developments. Public sector seems around the world to be faltering and failing in the face of such clear advances in the technology that we live through and in the way that we organize in a temporary capacity. So we're pioneering new models as a species. And these new models are fundamentally different than the way the government and our other civic institutions are functioning. So, in a way, the work that we do, organizing in a festival, what might seem like this sort of hedonistic, countercultural thing, it's not even becoming that anymore. It's becoming the R&D ground where we take our ideas of how to self-organize in a different way that we're doing on the internet and the cloud, and we actually test them. And we actually implement them, and we learn how to work together and how to engage in a different society.
2 minutes.
Yeah. Oh, I got 1 minute over here. So imagining all the different possibilities of how we can essentially restructure and reform our society in an organic way through the experimentation and iteration of coming together in new models and trying things out. And that's, a huge part of where the sort of festival or temporary gathering participatory models seem to be heading. And as we look around the world and just try to understand the different models and what works and replicate them. So really, this is the canvas that we have. In many ways, we are sort of repurposing infrastructure that currently exists and reimagining how we can more effectively use them. And in many cases, we have totally blank canvases that we can reimagine how to design things from scratch. And either way, we live at a really exciting time in humanity's history and have the ability to share information and connect with each other all around the world. And so this is our canvas, and this is our opportunity. Maybe festival culture and the ability to reimagine the way that we civically interact with each other and experiment and design and learn those lessons and then replicate the successful experiments that we find, learn those lessons and apply them vertical by vertical throughout our society can be one way that we start to change the world. Thank you.
We've got to keep moving on, but somebody has tweeted a really great question which I'd love you to answer. Christine Healy has asked, what sort of governance structure manages Burning Man?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, it's an evolving governance structure. Essentially, Burning Man does have tickets, and the tickets to Burning Man essentially fund the actual civic infrastructure of the city to be built, and which, in this case, Burning Man is, the content of the actual event is art that's contributed by the community. So a large percentage of that ticket revenue is going into the actual infrastructure of the city, as well as the grants that are funding the various art projects. So Burning Man as an organization, when it started, started just kind of, as a for-profit, because that was the easiest tax entity to be created. And over the last 2 years, we've been in a process of moving the entire organization into a nonprofit model. And this is actually one of the most inspiring things to me about being a part of it, is the founders of Burning Man have been doing this for many decades now. And they are gifting the equity of the LLC, the intellectual property that governs it and all that, into this nonprofit so that it can move from, a privately held company into a global nonprofit that can, facilitate this budding global movement. So I think it's an opportunity. We've seen really interesting things like last year where we had a ticket crisis, where the amount of people who wanted tickets to Burning Man versus the amount of people who had tickets for Burning Man, that number grew. And so we've had a lot of really interesting philosophical quandaries of experimenting with how to effectively manage a community to be based not on transactionalism or capitalism in the traditional way of who has the most money wins, but really how to facilitate a community where civic contribution is paramount, where creativity is paramount. And that's been the process that we've been in.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Bear. Our next speaker is Jess Scully. Jess is the Festival Director of Vivid Ideas in Sydney. She's also one of the curators of TEDx Sydney, and she hosts a weekly arts radio show called So Hot Right Now, which is, I guess, where Burning Man belongs.
Totally.
On 2SER.
Thank you. Two really inspiring presentations. I'm taking so many notes and sending so many tweets, but I'm totally paying attention. So I'm from Sydney, so I'm here to be the splashy, expensive, superficial version. That's my role here today. But I'd like to imagine that, I absolutely loved Emily's list of the 5 things festivals can be, and the thing that was great about the list, reading through them, it's actually what we want our cities to be. It's actually what we want our society to be, I think. And festivals can, in a lot of ways, be a microcosm of those things, places of social exchange and interaction and moments of coming together. They are us at our best, I think. If I had to pick one, I agree. I think we want particularly vivid ideas, but Vivid Sydney, I think, to be a catalyst. So who here knows Vivid Sydney? Okay, that's pretty good. Who here knows Vivid Ideas? Okay, that's also very good. Oh, hi. I'll take you through it very quickly. So Vivid Sydney is this bit. It's quite... If you haven't been there, I've got about 50 photos, so you'll feel like you were there anyway. It's been running since 2009. I've been involved since 2008. We have the most prosaic and unromantic of all of the birth stories of these festivals. We were initiated as part of a tourism governmental strategy to increase bed nights during the winter months. Which is great because we get funding from the New South Wales State Government, and we have a very clear set of KPIs which are about getting people to come to Sydney and stay for a long period of time. Vivid runs for an absurdly long time. It runs for 18 days, right in the heart of winter, which is kind of like you guys having spring. It's cute. Right,
that's it.
With those unromantic beginnings, I was asked to create, at the time in 2008, something around the creative industries because they had this feeling that was a thing, and we eventually, at first it was called Creative Sydney as a grassroots element. Basically, there's a music program curated at the Opera House. There's some fantastic stuff that Fergus Lanhern and Ben Marshall curate at the Opera House. There's some kind of link to the inventiveness of Mona and Dark Mofo in a way, in that they like to do specific commissions and collaborations from artists who might not be able to present those in other places, and they do the big marquee things like Kraftwerk this year, for example. But that was the top-down international excellence component, and I was the bottom-up grassroots sort of component. Eventually we did it too well, so they rebranded us and we're called Vivid Ideas now, and this is the part of Vivid that a lot of people know. There are installations, there's 70 light installations all around the city. It's very heavily crowdsourced internationally. There's an expressions of interest process. There's the curated stuff at the Opera House, and then this kind of crowdsourced stuff all around the city, lots of projections, lots of interactive work. There's some more stuff. This is the bit that I do, the other bit. Basically, Vivid Ideas is an exploration of the work that you have to do in order to make work as a creative person. But I like to think, though we do have KPIs and ROIs and all of those things, I like to think there's something very radical about it, because from my perspective, Vivid Ideas is all about realigning the way that we see our economy. I want Australia to be a place that's knowledge-driven and imagination-driven rather than resource-driven. And I think Vivid Ideas is a really rare opportunity that we have to have this very public visibility around the idea that creative practice in its many forms can actually be transformative of society and also a major economic driver as well. So that's where I'm coming from with our program. The majority of our program takes place on the top floor of the Museum of Contemporary Art, but we have 187 events over 18 days. We work with over 100 partners, and the way that I structure the program is that on the weekends we really focus on events that are around professional development, so particularly for students. Then there's also a whole lot of events for people who feel like they want to do something creative with their lives, but they're not quite there yet. They're not quite sure where to go. So it's kind of an entryway for a point for a lot of people who want to explore their own creativity and their own creative practice. During the week, we have a lot more of your straight down the line, siloed creative industry events and conferences and workshops, those sorts of things. And then during the weeknights, more of our signature program, which is more cross-disciplinary and is about exploring the future of creative practice and future opportunities for creative practice. I don't know Okay, right. So here are some of the categories. These are some of the things that we're interested in exploring, some of the industries. That's not even mine. Okay. These are some of the things that we're interested in doing, some of the topics we're interested in relation to those industry categories. And we explore those through a whole range of different events, which could be talks, portfolio reviews, exhibitions, all kinds of things. Lots and lots of different formats for these events. We had David Shrigley. It was pretty much the highlight for me this year. That was pretty great. So we have a combination of outstanding international contributors and incredible local people. This is William Yang. And these are some of the people that were part of our program this year. For me, I mean, I'm a kind of creative omnivore. What I like to bring to the program is a little bit of everything, and I think one of the crucial things about Vivid Ideas is that it's about cross-fertilisation across the creative sector. So we're not just for visual artists or filmmakers or writers, we're about the space between all of those things and the opportunities that emerge from people working together. I can't remember. Okay, right. So these are the 10 Commandments. I'm going to go more quickly. These are kind of our key signature topics. From here, one of the things that was really special for me this year was this Connect with Science series of events, which was all about how creativity works with scientists, and we had some amazing biomedical animators who joined us, and I think that's such a huge field for exploration for the creative sector as well. People did silly, funny things. We had a lot of kind of showing the working. That's what I like to do with a lot of our programs. Show how do you actually create community theatre that you develop over 3 or 4 years with a community. How do you actually create an animated series? And that's an international co-production. So we're all about pulling back the curtain and showing people what's going on behind the scenes. And this is another thing. Also, as Emily mentioned as well, one of the things that we want to do as a catalyst for change is to actually have an impact on a policy level. I also have worked in arts policy, and I understand how to start to understand how to put pressure on governments to do things. A year ago, we had a task. We had a think tank from the creative industries in New South Wales of how to develop that sector. Then we put pressure on the government, and exactly a year to the day later, they delivered their action plan for that industry, which they hadn't even contemplated doing before. So we have actually got the opportunity, because it is such a big platform, to have that sort of those sorts of outcomes in New South Wales. Aha! Okay, now this is the bit that relates to the conversation today. This was the line that actually jumped out at me. This is the whole point of festivals, as far as I can tell. It is the power of being together. It's an excuse. I see our entire program, that's someone holding on to our program, this is bait to get people into a room and to make them talk to the person next to us. You know, we have this perception that as Australians we're really gregarious and we'll talk, all mates, and we'll chat to everyone, but we're actually, most of us, incredibly shy and or self-conscious, and sometimes it really takes something extra to get us to forge a connection with someone that we don't know. And that's what I see our entire program, our entire festival is bait to make people meet each other and be in the same room. These are just some more images. Basically, this is when I get excited, when I see people exchanging details or having conversations with whoever's sitting next to them, or collaborating on work, or, passion face. I love passion face. And you'll be seeing a few more passion faces in the next few slides. Hand signals, those sorts of things. This means that matters. So for me, engaging audiences and communities, one of the things that I like, that I'm really conscious of is across the creative sector, you have all of these kind of niches and subcultures and categories. The best thing, the thing that really works for me, I think, is delving into each of those niches and seeing what we can pull out of them, and how we can mash them together. One of my favourite moments this year, I'm sure I've only got 1 minute left.
1 minute, yeah. Absolutely.
One of my favourite moments this year was seeing the computer geeks from the from the Computer World magazine and Sony PlayStation talking to the people from the CSIRO and the Garvan Institute about the LEAP, which is an interface that one of the scientists had that the gamers hadn't even seen before. That was my favourite moment, when you actually see different kinds of nerds interacting. It's fantastic. And in terms of encouraging creativity, I mean, this is really, that's all we do. For me, this is significant because for a lot of people, particularly people who come on the weekends, this is the first time that they've outed themselves as a creative. And for many of them, it's really gives people the, even for established artists, it's about being able to express your ideas, understand where you are in the context, and also understand that you're part of a community. Because when you work in individual practice, I don't know if you can tell, but I'm by myself a lot on my work, so when I see people, I have to talk at them really a lot. So, I think for a lot of us, that's the sort of, that's the warm fuzzy, is like knowing that there are other people who are going through the same thing you are. And also opportunities for people to show their work and demonstrate. This is awesome. This is Legs on the Wall, working with macrophonics to create dance interfaces so that performers can control the video and audio as they dance. So it's incredible stuff that you get to see this sort of work at the edge. And yes, I know, right, okay. Networks of niches, I said that. Different kinds of nerds, more nerds. Getting people who disagree with each other. So this is what I was going to say super quickly about curation versus co-curation or mass curation. We do a call for expressions of interest and we receive a lot of applications, but I still think that curation is an essential element because you have to make a cohesive program, and I think, as Emily said as well, part of your job is to steer through the chaff for your audience and to offer them clear pathways through a festival. Because Vivid runs for 18 days, I have to create these kind of conceptual blocks of content so that if you're into documentary photography, you come for those days. If you're into social change and design, you come for these days. So, getting people who just disagree with each other on stage is something that you can do as a curator, which probably doesn't happen so much from these other events. Like this is a London ad exec youth marketer, and this is Jello Biafra from the Kennedys, which was a really bad idea for me to put them both on stage at the same time, but it was interesting for the audience. And then, so this, I promise this is going to be really quick. So in terms of these different values that we talk about, our festivals possibly having or festivals of the future having, I see our demographic as being everyone. And the thing that excites me the most is seeing very young people and older people also, at the same event. That to me is a sign that this is a healthy ecosystem. Also, the thing that I think is really significant, and this, every one of these events is testament to this, the action isn't on the stage. It's, to me, the most exciting thing is the people who come to see the event and what happens in the audience, and getting them to meet each other is really the whole point. And that's it. Thank you.
I have to let you know, Jess, that Bear is now going to write a song called Passion Face.
Passion Face.
Our final speaker is Lee Carmichael. Lee is the creative director of Dark Mofo at Mona's Winter Festival. It's a festival of music, large-scale public art, feasts, you've got to be happy about that, interactive performances and film, and it takes place in Hobart in June. Oh, and apparently the feasts were amazing.
Well, at least all the intelligent speakers are out of the way.
Aww.
You guys are pretty good. So thanks for having me. I'm Lee Carmichael, the creative director of Dark Mofo. So I'm going to get straight to the point. Because I've only got 10 minutes, I chose just one of the various topics to discuss, and I'm interested in looking at how festivals engage audiences and communities, and what the difference is between an audience and the community. At first glance, they're kind of one and the same, but as you dig a little bit deeper, they get more complex, and it's important for organisers to understand the difference. So before I get to that, the meaning of a festival. In history, Roman periods, in the Roman period, in ancient times, festivals were a time for the community to get together and celebrate a significant moment. Things like the harvest festivals to give thanks, spring, celebrate new life, which now is kind of Easter. Winter solstices were often about death, renewal, rebirth and the cycles. And then there were initiation rites and coming of age ceremonies, that sort of thing. So that's kind of where the festival started. They were important, significant, and to celebrate at these things kind of made you a part of the community. So differences, just quickly, community is kind of a group with an idea that brings it together. Communities share things like place, economics, good or bad, the environment, certainly weather, tragedies that happen in communities and successes. So we kind of go through these things together, and that binds us. Where audiences can, it can be a room full of individuals that come from all over the place. They're kind of connected by the event, but kind of different. And I think the important thing for us, I think, as event organisers, is to understand who we're talking to. Sometimes it's a community and sometimes it's an audience. So it's evolved. The term festival's evolved, and so it's come from people celebrating. Now there's a lot of things that are called festivals. In ancient times, I would argue that just being a part of the festival, being there and being a part of it was the festival. You didn't need necessarily an artist or a performance on stage. So it was the act of celebrating that made it a festival. So there was no separation between performer and audience. Today we'd probably just call that a party. So more recently we've started to have things that really are their fairs and their events and their markets. They're kind of being branded as festivals, because festivals are kind of this buzzword that means fun and having a good time. Things like oyster festivals and beer festivals, they're really fairs in my mind. Not that it matters, it's just a branding and a marketing term. But, I'm not against beer festivals. But I think I've got an example of one that I think is probably pushing the term festival a little hard. This was just something they ran in London. It's really just a marketing campaign, but it does highlight where the term's going. I think they had some free gigs, but really the idea is that they want you to log on to iTunes and download and watch the performances. So it seems like a long way from this idea of celebrating as a community. And I think I downloaded a clip from David Lynch, who I think would agree with me on this in regards to experiencing.
Now, if you're playing the movie on a telephone, you will never in a trillion years experience the film. You'll think you have experienced it, but you'll be cheated. It's such a sadness that you think you've seen a film on your fucking telephone. Get real.
So, I think that applies to festivals as well. So I'd like to think that our festivals have a deep enough experience to that they can't be duplicated through an iPhone. I think if they can, then we're all in trouble. Anyway, so Dark Mofo. That was our little experience that we sent out to the world via TV and large screens at the MCG. We don't say much. So just to summarise Dark Mofo, Mona's run 6 festivals now, 5 Monofomas that happen in summer, and the most recent thing have done is Dark Mofo. Interestingly, summer seemed easy, or not easy. Summer seemed like the obvious place to run a festival. Winter's been a bit of it's a hard sell in Tassie. It's a downtime for tourism. And so we thought we'd do this crazy thing, and we thought Mona would have a go at winter. What happened is that we had our largest box office of any of our festivals. We had 170,000 unique visitors on our website, which was 3 times our previous best for a summer festival. We had almost 30% of ticket sales come from outside of Tassie, which is the second best after Monofoma this year. Had about 20,000 people join up for our free flights campaign. 82% of Tasmanians said that they believed the festival has changed their perceptions about winter in the state. We generated 4.3 million in advertising equivalent media, and we reached about 90 million, and those are their figures and stats that come from Tourism Tas. So we're really shocked at it. Kind of turned out to be 3 times bigger than our biggest festival, and summer took 5 years to grow, and it started at 7% outside of the state, and this year in January, summer had 46%. So straight away in first year, Dark Mofo went to 27%, and everything was 3 times bigger. So we're kind of sitting around wondering why that happened. Lots of things have been tried and failed in winter in Hobart. I've picked 5 things that I think made it the success that it turned out to be. Well, you guys were 10, and I think Emily had 2 lots of 5, so I'll go 5. So I think for Dark Mofo, unifying idea. So for us, we chose the winter solstice, which is the longest night of the year. Hobart, being the furthest south of any capital city, has the longest night. So we chose something unique to the place, and we sold the festival around that idea. And so we invited the community in to celebrate that moment that's unique to Hobart. I think having a unifying idea, if you're talking about community, is really important. Something that sits above the artwork, the performers, something that can bring in. So the celebration. In Tassie, weather, we cop a lot of flack over our weather, so we turned that on its head and we celebrated it. We also brought down an amazing artwork that kind of symbolised the unification of the city. Spectra, which went up 15 kilometres into the sky and had thousands of people visit it at all hours of the night. Second thing, bread and circuses, which is an ancient Roman kind of saying. I think they come around about 140 BC when the Romans, in the Senate, some party or group were trying to win votes, and they kind of talking about keeping the masses happy, and they were saying, just give them bread and circuses. And the reason I put this in here, for us, it's actually about keeping the whole thing quite simple. For us, bread and circuses turned into fire and food. The great art and the performers and the people that we brought in from all around the world, they're kind of a bonus. I think the hook or the bait, as someone said, it's bread and circuses. We almost called our festival this, but it was kind of a little contrived. So we had the fire, we had lasers, circuses, food, cooking beasts in the street, which was a nightmare to get through through Hobart City Council, but we got there. We did the feast, so the whole thing became really a community celebration, and we were celebrating our city, our weather, our people, our food, and we were enjoying art experiences all over the city at the same time. But the point of this talk is, how to engage the community, and this is how we've done it. More fire. We had all these fire pits up the main street of Salamanca, and kind of small groups gathered around, and we had really low-key acoustic musicians. Circuses, so we just turned the feast into a wild kind of party, and we just had the performers roving through, standing on tables, lying on the floor, asking people to give them a cuddle. It was kind of chaos, and that's how, so there was no stage.
2 minutes.
Yep, it was performer and audience all mixed into one. More circus. This was my favourite photo. This is an indoor gig, but the community, obviously, they got the idea with winter, and so they had all these umbrellas up during the presets. So, pretty young and fun band, or young audience, fun band, and I just really love that idea of embracing what we were there to celebrate. Finished with Barbarian and some more fire. 3, nudity, so that always works. A cheap way to get media. So we had a nude swim, invited the community in. We only had about 30 registered until the police banned it. Then it went global, and we ended up with, I think we had to cut registrations off at about 600. So this is, just a way that the community could actually celebrate this moment. So this was 1 degrees. I was at the other end, as far away from the camera as possible. And it was cold. So we actually, that event was just saying, we don't care that it's cold, we're going to embrace it. The other thing is, risk. If you can't take risk in festivals and with programming, I don't know where else you should. But there's nothing really overexciting about doing things that have been done before. So I think as festival directors, and we should push into new space as hard as we can. That's with programming, this shopping trolley, burning the shopping trolley idea, getting a performer and moving it all around Australia. That's great, but I really think locally we also need to take some risk and program some things that may work or fail. This is how we took risk.
No, I'm just about done. I thought, you know what, I'm just about going to put my cue in the rack when I saw this the other night, and here we are for the time-honoured toss of the coin. What the hell is going on? Is that dude burning under there? I give up. This game's passed me by.
There's a game of footy. Stick with it, Mickey. We need you as part of this campaign of ours. There's a game played down in Tasmania where that person came from today, and it was Hawthorn taking on the great.
So that's how we launched our festival in Melbourne. Fifth one's luck, and I think you always need a bit. With us, we were lucky. We booked the Sky Whale very early, which was a collaboration with the Canberra Centenary Festival. We didn't foresee the furore that would cause, or the media, so we were always included in all those stories. And then obviously when we did it, we had the media there wanting to know all about it. So I think I was interviewed by every capital city in Australia the morning that this happened, which is kind of great that art can still provoke. It is confusing. So just to summarise, unifying idea, bread and circuses, nudity, risk and luck. And, I really think that festivals with a unifying idea, they're unique to place, can actually bring communities together, they can change perceptions, and they can actually make life, worth living. So that's me.
Thank you. There's actually been some fantastic tweets, but we might ask for some questions now. If you want to put up your hand, anyone? Well, I'll start then with a fantastic comment from Jim Rimmer. He suggests, listening to you, that cultural festivals are becoming the R&D labs for restructuring society in more organic and resilient forms. Do you think that's true?
Well, it's true for the people here.
Yes.
Like, let's not pretend. Like, you've assembled a really amazing panel, but it's the exception, not the rule, right?
Yes.
So, and I guess one of the things that I get scared of is being obnoxious about the certain conditions that are very special to all of our contexts that are not afforded to other kinds of organisations. So, and I think sometimes people forget it's not the individuals in organisations that are determining them being boring or shopping trolley-esque, but there are very difficult pressures placed on state festivals in particular in Australia with a very small population that mean that it's it's hard to innovate, and you know, like, so, you know, Dark Mofo is a brand new thing. Next Wave is like predicated on being a new thing every single time. You know, that's its remit, is to take risks and to change. You know, like Vivid's quite new. Burning Man has an agenda which is about, you know, shifts, and I think if a festival isn't afforded that kind of space, then it's a much more difficult game. So I guess that's like the complexity, and I'm sure people here who run festivals too would argue that is like we all have really special conditions that allow us to be what we are.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, one challenge that comes to mind with that is around radical inclusion, which is one of the things that Burning Man strives to be at its core. But it's a very paradoxical, you know, value to place, because people's time and energy, ability to be flexible enough to go and engage and celebrate, that is not something that everyone in this world, in fact, that is something that the majority of these people in this world do not have that luxury afforded to them. Yeah. So as we try to innovate this idea of what a festival is to be radically inclusive, we stumble into major obstacles. And I think that is absolutely one of the greatest challenges to all of us who want to actually manifest this culture that can be generated in petri dish of a festival and apply it to the world in a larger way.
Yes.
It's not really a question. My name is Greg Pritchard. Driven from Canberra to plug my festival. I work for the Native Fringe, which is probably the smallest, coolest art festival in Australia, which is 4 hours from Melbourne.
Do you want to come and stand here so people can...
I can just use my outside voice.
Use your outside.
So the Native Fringe has been running for 14 years, and it creates some amazing work, but we don't really promote it very well, and I've taken on that job, obviously. It's at the end of November, it's Cup weekend. This year we're actually launching a thing called Made in Nanamuck. And because we've created all this amazing work in the last 14 years, only people who have seen it have actually been those who know about the festival that have come up. So I've come to personally invite you all to the launch of Made in Nanamuck, and some of those in the room will get actual emails tomorrow. So the idea of shopping trolley, when I saw that, I kind of went, wow, that's kind of what we're trying to avoid. You know, to actually have some work that we can resell again rather than buy in things. And that's kind of what I have to say. The Native Fringe is actually probably closer to Burning Man than Burning Sea, which I have been to. And if you're still in the country in a month's time, you should come down and visit. I'll hand out some material that you will get.
Any other questions? Yes.
Bit of a follow-on tweet. Each of you do the opposite of the Shopping Trolley Festival, and each of you has an incredibly interesting. You hear me? Has an incredibly interesting offer. Probably right, Emily. It's probably this special panel is probably a little bit the exception to the rule. Although you each have a different end result or a very innovative set of subject matter, strikes me that each of you represents an organisation whose underpinnings are very, very common. Vivid and Next Wave are both completely contingent on state subsidy to exist. Lee, your festival and your core venue is contingent on an individual private patron. It's probably the most historical model for artistic expression of all. And Bear, I guess you're a representative of an entity which is somewhere between libertarian and socialist and collectivist, in one way or another is a self-regulating entity. Each of those three models have got pretty obvious, pretty common sense risks and limitations to them beyond just arts. Do you think it matters? All of you are creative individuals, you work with other creative individuals, you represent program commission creative individuals and companies, but you're still tethered to very old school structures with their limitations. Does that matter, and is there anything that anyone can do to get out of those paradigms?
I'm going to defer because my chair is here. And we have been thinking a lot about this kind of stuff, and Janine did a huge chunk of research this year into exactly that question. So, Janine.
I'm Janine, I'm chair at Next Wave. So we're working quite deeply on how, on this big question of how do we actually create forms of revenue and ways to sustain ourselves that mean that we have the creative freedom to be able to explore all of these kind of curious corners that we would like to at Next Wave. So I don't know that we actually have the definitive answer yet, but we've done a truckload of research into, I guess, social enterprise models that are in the arts and creative and cultural industries all around the world. So I don't know, I probably should just leave it at that rather than go into specific examples, but I think
you've got an appetite for looking at it.
We've got a massive appetite for looking, and I would be super interested to talk to any of the panelists about ways and models that they've discovered for creating, I guess, self-funded forms that offer that freedom, that creative freedom to do what it is that we all, I guess, hold so closely to our hearts.
Thank you very much. We're actually going to have to, I'm sorry, but it's right on 7 o'clock, but everyone is staying, and if you just listen to Lenine, she will explain to you how your conversation, the conversation that you want to have with these people, can continue outside. This is Lenine Burke, everybody.
Oh, what a terrible moment to get introduced and you're like, wet your pants, I'm so excited for the question. Anyway, sorry to interrupt that.
That's such a good question.
I usually live in Brisbane, hence why I'm like freezing. So outside it's really cold, but it's not raining, and you'll all probably be quite comfortable. So I got commissioned by Deakin and the API to think about put in a proposal to think about a sort of a small, intimate, humble work that could be available to you after this experience to have an ongoing conversation. So I came up with this little idea called Work with Melbourne, and it's essentially inspired by from love of bottle to word games to fridge magnet poetry to a kind of obsession that people have to put texts on walls and in media and in video work. And we just literally made the design for these beautiful blocks. We have this awesome printer guy make them. And there are 300 of these, double-sided, which gives you 600 words. And we're just literally now, there's about 5 of us in our very ever first attempt, is what you're going to experience tonight. So I've never even seen all the blocks. I've only seen 25 of them. So I'm having that nervous anxiety as a practitioner now, hoping one know this thing works. If it doesn't, let me know, we'll fix it for tomorrow night. So we're going to be here 7 to 8 tonight, tomorrow night and Saturday night. And we just invite people and all of the general public to create anything that you would like to with a series of words. If anybody gets particularly cranky because we don't have a word that you want, even though we've been doing a lot of research into the most popular words, and words, we do have 4 miniature whiteboards that can accommodate your requests. So the idea is that we've started a little hashtag that we've been gently put words with Melbourne just all with the hashtag symbol at the front of it. And so if you want to take a photograph of it, and we're running on Instagram and Twitter, but whatever else you want to use online, you can. And the idea is at the end of that, Deakin's going to pull together the 3 hours of Word with Melbourne over the next 3 nights to see what people in Melbourne are talking about, or what things you would like to say in your kind of context to your own community. And so you can jump on their website next week and they'll have sort of done something technical to bring all that together.
So come and play with words with us, and all our guests are going to, I hope, are going to come out with us, and perhaps you can ask them your burning questions then. Thank you very much for coming.